Welcome everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you for joining me. It's with a sad and heavy heart to announce the passing of one Jim Steinman at the age of 73. Best known for his work with Meat Loaf on their classic 1977 album, Bat Outta Hell, he's also known as a composer, lyricist, producer, playwright, arranger, pianist, and singer. And he began his career in musical theater, but of course rose to prominence when he paired up with Meat Loaf for the classic Bat Outta Hell in 1977. But the album is as much a Jim Steinman album as it is a Meat Loaf album. However, Meat Loaf would receive top billing while Jim Steinman would only receive the much smaller typeface below. It did go on to become one of the biggest selling albums of all time, selling upwards of 14 million copies in the United States alone, and estimated sales of over 40 million copies worldwide. It's also spent over 522 weeks on the UK album chart, and in 2017 it was developed into a musical and premiered in both London and New York City. In 1981, Jim recorded his only solo album, Bad for Good. The songs on here were intended for Meat Loaf and a follow-up album to Bat Outta Hell. And had Meat Loaf actually recorded and released them, it was to be titled Renegade Angel. But of course, Meat Loaf was having vocal issues at the time, so Jim proceeded to record the songs himself. However, it was nowhere near as successful as the original Bat Outta Hell album. Also in 1981, Jim and Meat Loaf would re-team for Meat Loaf's Dead Ringer album, and once again Jim would write all of the songs for the album, but it was not as successful as the Bat Outta Hell album. In 1983, it saw Jim produce Bonnie Tyler's album Faster Than the Speed of Light, of which he wrote 2 songs for, including Total Eclipse of the Heart, which went all the way to number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. And he'd work with Bonnie Tyler again in 1984 and produce her top 40 hit, Holding Out for a Hero. He would work with Air Supply in 1983 as well, and he'd write for them their number 2 Billboard Hot 100 hit, Making Love Out of Nothing at All. And he'd also work with some other very disparate artists such as Barry Manilow, Barbra Streisand, Ian Hunter of Mott the Hoople, and on the Streets of Fire soundtrack. And in 1984, he produced Billy Squier's Signs of Life album. And also in 1984, he was part of the controversial move where Def Leppard hired Jim Steinman to produce their album that would ultimately become Hysteria. We all know that never came to be. However, there is an album recorded by Jim Steinman from Def Leppard, but they say it will never see the light of day. Jim Steinman had to be bought out of this contract. Apparently it was very expensive. He was paid in full for what he was owed so that Mutt Lange could take over. Jim would continue to be an in-demand songwriter and producer after this, working with the WWF and Hulk Hogan in 1985, the Iron Eagle soundtrack in 1986, Sisters of Mercy in 1987, and the Rude Awakening soundtrack in 1989. Also in 1989, he formed a brand new band called Pandora's Box, which featured 4 female front women singing for it, as well as Jim Steinman, and they released one album called Original Sin, and it included the original version of the song It's All Coming Back to Me Now. This would become later a number 2 Billboard Hot 100 hit for Celine Dion. Now, at around the same time, Jim and Meat Loaf began meeting and formulating a plan for working on Bat Outta Hell 2. It would ultimately get released in 1993 and reach number 1 in both the US and the UK, and of course featured the number 1 hit, I'd Do Anything for Love But I Won't Do That, which reached that top position in an astounding 28 different countries. Ultimately, it would sell 5 million copies in the US and over 14 million copies around the world, putting both Jim and Meat Loaf back on top at the time. Now, continuing through the 90s, Steinman would be credited as writing and producing for a number of different artists. In 1996, he worked on a movie version of Bat Outta Hell that would later transition into the musical version that would become the 2017 one. In 1998, he and Meat Loaf collaborated again on 3 new recordings that were collected together and released as part of a best of compilation. But by 2003, though, he had moved into television production, working on the MTV TV show Wuthering Heights. And in 2006, Meat Loaf returned with Bat Out of Hell 3, which did include songs composed by Jim Steinman, although he was not involved in the recording and did not write all of the songs. The remainder of those and the production duties would be handled by Desmond Child, as well as some other outside writers. But finally, in 2016, Jim Steinman and Meat Loaf would re-team up again for the Braver Than We Are album, putting a nice cap on their career. It contained 10 songs composed by Steinman. And in 2017, his musical version of Bat Out of Hell finally opened. In the remaining years, Jim was battling many different health issues and pretty much stayed under the radar. But with his passing, he will not be forgotten. He has left an indelible mark, and it just cannot be topped as far as what his legacy is. He is a larger-than-life character, but I guess heaven could wait no longer. Rest in peace, Jim. Your music will live on in the hearts and minds of all your fans. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Please leave your comments below and your memories and thoughts on Jim Steinman. And everyone go out and enjoy some music written or produced by him and celebrate the life of one Jim Steinman. Thank you. Take care and have a good one. Bye-bye.